MetalFab projects. Easy projects to make, project ideas, sales tips, a lot more in this video. Check it out. So all of these projects I made using the X-Tool MetalFab, an awesome laser welder that can be put into a CNC to make all kinds of really cool projects. So in this video, I'm gonna kind of explore some of the ideas, lots of tips and tricks on how to get smalls. So a ton of ornaments, how to get them really clean, make sure there's no dross or burrs, lots of other applications. Here, yeah, Christmas, great sales time, kind of return of investment. This is actually something you can make year round, very popular, but some other ideas, not just Christmas related as well. Some tips on signs and some other things. So we've got some timestamps you can skip on around if you want, but first up, quick overview on the MetalFab. So starting off, just a quick overview. Yes, it is a laser welder. So all the welding applications, but also there's the CNC where you can do all the cutting. Amazing machine, so much to it. My other videos really went into a lot of the specs. This is going to be more of projects and possibilities. But yeah, the welder, phenomenal. And it's really user-friendly, beginner-friendly. Lots more on that in other beauty videos and future videos. But here, we're really going to showcase the CNC. And so you hook up the laser welder to your CNC, really easy, and it's so powerful and it can do amazing things. Now, you of course do have the option of running different gas options for different things, but really the air compressor, just the air compressor, you can do some pretty impressive stuff. There is the pass-through. We're going to showcase that in the video. The normal working area is 24 inches by 24 inches, but you can go longer with the pass-through. It's just crazy fast. It's fast, it's intuitive, there's all the cameras, there's all the really cool features of the software. We will dig into the software a little bit at the end of the video, but yeah, you can maximize all your material, all your spaces. All right, let's see it in action. So obviously we can do signs. We're going to get to signs, but first I want to talk about doing these smalls. Specifically ornaments, they are great sellers. You know, at a one-day craft show, you can make $1,000 to $2,000 just on ornaments. And there's something you can really make year-round. We'll talk about some other small applications. But this machine is pretty impressive, right? Here I have a 24-inch by 24-inch stainless steel panel, and it depends on how complex the design is, but 15 to 30 minutes to do a whole sheet, 20, 30 ornaments. So it's really quick and it's so intricate. You have a super thin kerf, so it can do really intricate designs. Great results. We'll talk a little bit more about settings to make sure you don't have burrs, but look at it. I mean, it's pretty impressive how much you can fit on a page, on a sheet, really clean cuts. So this is a bit more specific to the MetalFab and its use. If you're just here for the overview, you can use the timestamps to skip on ahead. But as far as getting really clean cuts with minimal dross or any of that, slag on the back, you gotta have your settings dialed in. And a big part of that is, the machine has a lot of calibration settings, and there's one to make sure that red light is coming centered and everything is centered, making sure your lens covers are clean. If you ignore those things, you're gonna get more dross, especially on more intricate shapes like these ornaments, where it's going all kinds of crazy ways, and that's just gonna take more time for cleanup. And so, for all the stainless steel, which is the ornaments, I just did stainless steel on those, you can just use the air compressor. So no, fancy tanks for that. So the air compressor and the air dryer, using the X-Tool ones here, clean cuts, cut through great. You have that thin kerf, really clean. And if everything's dialed in as far as the settings and everything's centered, really clean, minimal cleanup. I rushed that, so I had to do a little bit of extra cleaning, which you'll see shortly, and some tips on that. If you're gonna cut carbon steel or maybe some of other products, you're gonna need oxygen just to cut through and to have that minimal dross. And so oxygen tank, that was definitely new for me, but air gas supplier, I went to a local welding store. You can rent the tanks or you can buy the tanks. I just bought the tank, and it's gonna last me a long while because I got big tanks. And so that was able to get really clean cuts in the carbon steel using that 2mm carbon steel. I also did it for 5mm. Anyway, If you're gonna do bigger signs, especially like outdoor signs, and maybe someone wants a steel that rusts, unlike stainless, then you're gonna need that oxygen. The one thing to consider with oxygen, it is gonna leave a wider kerf. And so those really intricate designs, you can't get as intricate because the kerf is a little bit thicker. Now, much less than a plasma cutter, but that's just something to consider with the oxygen for carbon steel and such. So one tip after the fact is taking your sheet with all those cutouts and just putting the pieces in there. It kind of holds them in place. So that's one thing you could do. I definitely would recommend clamping as opposed to doing that. Sometimes maybe, like I said, your settings weren't quite there, so you got to grind everything out, make sure everything's clean on the backside. So you can do that. Now, you could use a bench grinder like this, but sandpaper, even 40 grit, isn't really going to cut it. Really, it's going to be an angle grinder. Now, don't be an idiot like me and use your hand and think that you're a pro and you can hold it because you're going to cut off part of your finger. Yeah, that happened. So at least using a clamp, right? Just a clamp here, whether it's a flap wheel, whether it's, a grinding disc, you just clamp it in place, and any burrs that you have, any bit of that dross because your settings weren't quite there, just clean it up. Also, if you want to polish it, right? I ended up polishing mine because I wanted a different sheen. That was the aesthetic, the look I was going for. Just a quick clamp like this works great. Actually, that cardboard kind of helped. Keep everything in place. So this is where I started. Now, I ended up doing about 200 of these ornaments, and I really thought this was the way to go about it, and I would still hold to that. So you can see there's some like little intricate pieces that didn't quite get through. We'll talk about that in a second. But this is what I ended up doing. I just got, hopped on Amazon, got an extra little welding table, little folding cart, but these little lockdown clamps, lifesaver. And so it clamps, it's all metal, you don't have to worry about the heat burning the quick clamps like it did on the rubber there. This just works so much faster. This was so efficient. I was able to do one side, quickly turn it, could do both sides, and get a really polished ornament. Now these got really shiny. Now you could use the different grits. We'll talk about some of the different grits as far as different disc attachments for an angle grinder or a sander, but I highly recommend if you're going to do smalls. This table, I mean, it's like 120 bucks, and these clamps were like $20. I'm going to definitely use these for welding, but great tip. So a little bit slower here, just talking about the different wheels to get heavy cleanup. So if you have heavy dross and you really need it polished up a lot, get rid of those burrs, right? Obviously grinding wheels are great. A little bit more aggressive, definitely. These flat wheels are incredible. And so what I found, this, if you have heavy dross, I kind of started with this. So my settings were off, right? And started with this, those big, thick burrs. And then once I got the really, sharp ones that would wear through sandpaper really quick, just went to flat wheels. If I needed to really polish it down, I started with 40 grit, but primarily it was this, and then I did 80 grit. Now, if you want to polish up a sign, if you want to, like this sign in the background, and a lot of them, I just use sandpaper just to get kind of a little bit of a brush. 220 is usually where I started, just to get a nice uniform sanding. But if you want to get that, chrome effect, really polished, flat wheel, definitely the way to go. 80 grit's fine. And so some options there, really simple, really easy to do, but there you go. Like I mentioned, the kerf of the laser is so small. It's so small that these little intricate pieces might get stuck in place. So my son and I, we just use this little punch set. We end up getting two, and it makes really quick work of it. There's all the different sizes. Just the little hammer, we're carefully punching out those little intricate pieces because we did some pretty intricate ornaments. And so you can do this before you grind the back. You can do this after the fact. We didn't really see a difference either way, but eventually you have those little small pieces you're going to have to punch out. So this was definitely really handy. We also used the welding table itself just to kind of punch through the holes, but little hammer, little punch set. All right, well, here you can see on the left, this one needs to be ground. But on the top here, this is what the stainless steel looks like. Well, I want it to look a little bit smoother. I want the insides to be smoother. Now, I can use the grinding wheel, but what about the inside? What about the edges? You could use a buffer. There's a lot of options, but this is something I've been doing a lot, is using rock tumblers. And so I've found, I showed this in one of my last MetalFab videos, you just throw it in there with some stainless steel pins, some water, a little bit of soap, right? Just in case, get rid of any grease or anything anything like that. And for about 3 days, after I've done the grinding to make sure any heavy dross is eliminated, if I put it in one of these larger rock tumblers, this one here is one of the larger size, I got great results. I ended up doing two. I'll link both of them down below. But great results after the fact. Dry them off. There's still, some of that gunk and the color, right? Some from the rust, and it's really from the inside, any of those burrs that came off. This was all stainless steel, and so really clean, right? Really clean. Now at this point, I could shine them up even more. I could go back to a buffer or a sander. I could add some polish. I kind of like this effect. Those stainless steel pins kind of gave it a uniform look. You can kind of still see some of those, like it's not handmade, but it's hand ground and hand sanded. So it kind of gives it a little bit more homemade vibe as opposed to industrial. And so I kind of like all the marks that it left. But quick tip when you're cleaning it up, use like a little sieve like that. It gets everywhere. Get a little basin. It can make a mess. This stuff, gets pretty messy. But definitely a sink like this is really helpful. Yeah, so here you can see it. Pretty clean, and especially all those intricate pieces. So after some grinding, some smoothing, and then running through the rock tumbler for a couple days, it's awesome, right? And so I think great results. At this point, I didn't do anything other than dry it. Now, I know there are some different materials out there and different liquids. I just don't know enough about metal. I'm new to this. So if you are, savvy in the metal world, specifically with stainless steel. Now I have bluing agents for carbon steel and, some other ways there, for some rust prevention. Obviously you could paint these. But if I wanted to go with just bare metal, stainless steel, if you got any tips, any videos for future videos for me to incorporate, drop some comments down below. Or what are some things I could add? Some folks I did test out a little bit with some boiled linseed oil and some other things just to see if I had a different effect, or some stainless steel cleaners. Didn't really find a polish that I loved. So if I want to take it next level, any recommendations, drop it down below. But I think these turned out great. This is after the fact. I'm doing this voiceover. Very popular, very popular. Folks loved these. It was very unique. You can see some I even did do some engraving. I'll talk about that in a second. But really, really unique. Now you of course could do other metals, not just stainless steel, or even I didn't do really any with the carbon steel. You could do brass, right? You could do brass. You could do all kinds of possibilities. With the brass, it's just using the air compressor. And again, that kerf is so small, but you can do some bigger ornaments. You can do smaller ones. You could do jewelry. This is something I showed in one of my very first times testing this machine when it first came out. But anyway, brass, nothing falls through and you worried like it didn't work. Well, again, that kerf is just so small. This is 1mm brass, but that's something I definitely want to explore a little bit more in the future. So ornaments, obviously you could do plates, you could do jewelry, you could do earrings, necklaces, pendants, necklaces, a lot more. Just recently I did a whole video talking about these metals where you can make custom metals. These were also cut out of stainless steel. And then I actually took them to the F2 Ultra MOPA laser from Xtool to do some color engraving. But on the MetalFab, you can actually do engraving before cutting if you want to. But I think I like this method a little bit more. Cut my blanks out and then I can sand them, do any kind of, grinding that I need to do. And then after the fact, when it's where I want it to be, then I can add the engraving. Here are some bottle openers, custom bottle openers. Again, if you want to see more on this process, on these, some other tips along these lines, you can check out that video for more. So I also want to talk about metal signs, some possibilities, some considerations. So you can do like a full size sheet here, and then of course, maximize all that space for some more ornaments along the way. Here's some of that carbon steel. So I went with the 2mm carbon steel here. Here, a lot of different parts, right? It can move really fast. It's really clean. Get your settings dialed in, everything just falls right through. And so here is like an oversized bear, and we'll talk about some more files and some more ideas, later in the video, especially for sales ideas. But here you can see just cutting out a bunch of different signs. This is the first time I really explored with the custom saying. So like whether it's a verse, whether it's a quote, but really, really playing around with it. You can see these holes here. We're going to talk about that. There's a special little bonus here on talking about standoffs and mounting, really for higher end clients. If you're going to do this maybe for a business park or a business and you want to do the signage, metal, there's a lot more there for bigger business to business connections. Of course, you can do these for customers and one-offs, you know, a couple $100 here and there. But this machine is really suited for large scale projects. And so doing, you know, custom signs for, like I mentioned, business park or other businesses can do great. You can also do crazy intricate designs. Now, in retrospect, I probably would have done engraving instead of all those little things that I had to pop out because, again, that kerf is so small. But crazy, crazy what you can do. Now, we showed this earlier as far as sanding, as far as, you know, angle grinder. We can use the sander, and that's really what I went for most of these. I kind of liked, it was like a brushed metal effect and look. There's that surf prep sander. I love this. I use this on all my projects, just so easy. But anyway, about 220 grit, great sanding. Or you can just go ahead and use the flap wheel. But here you can see that 220 grit just slightly abrades it, just any kind of spots that weren't quite so. Maybe it burned a little bit hotter. You know, this is carbon steel, so this can rust any kind of moisture, but it gets that uniform look. At this point, you could add a bluing agent, you know, something like that, or you could, a lot of possibilities. Of course, painting, powder coating. So I'm going to explore some more finish types in the future. Again, I'd really love any recommendations of videos to check out or ideas to kind of experiment with future videos. But I thought this was a great look. And so for most of my signs, I did this. But the angle grinder is great as well. And so this is that video I referenced, was my last video where this is that 5mm thick carbon steel. And it needed a little bit of cleanup. But the angle grinder just gives a really good look as well. But definitely my favorite are these flap wheels with the angle grinder, you know, 80 grit up to 120 grit. It just gives a really, really cool look. This one's stainless steel here, but you can get the same effect with carbon steel. And so really fun what you can do for these custom signs, or if you just want to batch out a bunch that you think are really popular. The insides, you know, you'd have to go back with a Dremel or a multi-tool to make sure you're cleaning up all the burrs on the inside. Didn't quite get to that on some of these. But the pass-through, right? This was that other video where I really did show you can do larger signs. So you're still limited to a height of 24 inches, but you have limitless length. And so here was running oxygen, cutting this carbon steel, and even though the oxygen gives it that thicker kerf, still great, great results on this really, really thick stuff. And so again, maybe you have a client or a business that wants outside signs, really big ones, something to consider. Again, there's that video for a little bit more on this process. But so many more ideas. You know, this is the last little tip here before we explore the software and some considerations. Went ahead and did my logo. You've seen that in the background of these videos here. But this is something that I think is for a lot of folks. And so here I'm using the full size, and I do have those little standoffs. And I want to talk about these standoffs. This was new to me, you know, up until like half a year ago, where I leave those holes there. But I cut this design so I could put some LED lights behind it. Now, you could do a lot more with it, but the standoffs is, if this is new to you, you know, if I'm going to mount it, measure where I want it, obviously get it all center, sure. And then where those holes are, you just want to, you know, go ahead and make your circles, get it right where you want it, know where those 4 holes are, and then you add in these little standoffs. Now, they make these in all kinds of styles. Basically, this is the side that gets mounted to your wall. So if you don't have wood, you obviously would use those little, you know, drywall anchors. So go ahead and mount those in place. If you get everything lined up perfectly, it'll save you, save you some headaches. And then once you have those, then you add in the screw component, which screws to the top. And so on these ones, it's just about an inch of a spacer, and then these just go in, and that's how you mount it to the wall. But it also gives it a cool effect, a little bit of depth. So even without LED lights, I think it looks pretty cool there. How it's mounted, it's not, you know, up against the wall. Also helps if, you know, something's bent back a bit, don't damage the wall. So that's an idea. Also show how you can mount this to, you know, smaller pieces for a plaque, but that gives you the idea, a little bit of depth. There you can see it. I think this works great. So that's one consideration. Of course, you could add some LEDs on the back. I didn't play around with it too much on what you could do. Yeah, you see the depth. Okay, yeah, they get the idea, dude. All right, adding these LEDs just on the back, and pretty simple. There's so many different LEDs out there. And so you can do those, cut those, drill your hole, feed it through, and then you got yourself a backlit sign. Now you could do like a piece of acrylic behind, like a frosted acrylic. There's other ways to kind of diffuse it so it's not as, you can make it more subtle. A lot more to be done with that. Here's a standoff with some acrylic on wood. You could do the same idea with your metal on a wood plaque. So you can make really, really fancy next level signs. So there's a lot more to be done with those standoffs. So another little tip. But here they are, the craft show, very popular. I did include, hey, if you want a custom metal sign, here's some ideas you can inspire if you're going to do this at a craft show. Put it on Facebook, right? Reach out. You'd be surprised how many folks want something like that, want a custom sign. But just some different options showing people, hey, this is a look you could go for. A lot of really cool stuff, a little bit of return of investment here. All right, want to go over the software a bit, some cool little tips, and then some considerations. So if you are new to Xtool, their software is crazy intuitive, so easy, and everything has just gotten so much better as far as all the settings. They've already done the work for you, so you can just go ahead and go to their tool library, their material library, and just check what material you're using. Lots of different presets in here that they have all the cutting settings, the engraving settings, all of that good stuff already there for you. Also something like this, if I had all these different files and designs, let's say I wanted to, optimize it, right? So I can select what I want. I started using this a lot more, especially you can see in the background with those, where I'm going to go to Smart Nesting. And you can do it based on your picture. You can do it based on a custom size. So I'm going to go ahead, a standard sheet that I've been using, the Xtool selected sheets of metal. It's about 600 by 600. And it's just going to automatically rotate everything for you to maximize your sheet. I still did some adjusting to move some things around. Now, I've got a lot of different files in here, so that's why it's a little bit chaotic. Obviously, the more files you have, it's going to be slower. So I've got a ton of different images in here, so it's a little bit slower. But here, you can see I can fit a lot more in there. And so that's a really cool feature. You don't have to manually click on each one and rotate it. So it's going to maximize your product. So software is really simple. It's going to tell you the recommendation of which nozzle to use. Like I mentioned earlier, the stainless steel, we just used the Xtool air compressor and the save gas nozzle, and it gave me all the settings, and I got really clean results when I did that. If I'm switching over to carbon steel, it's going to tell me, hey, you should use oxygen for this. So software is really simple. What specifically are you hoping to see with software? Drop it in the comments and I'll hopefully add it to our next video on the MetalFab. Of course, all the other laser videos, I talk about it a lot. Gonna talk about some other sales ideas. So you could obviously go to Etsy. That's just one place you can go and looking at those signs. So here's that metal sign, kind of the simple example. Hey, here's just one I found, and here's someone. I mean, look at the prices that some people are, charging. Okay, sizes. I'm gonna do 24 inches. Well, a 24 inch by 24 inch is the max. I mean, you could do the pass through with this machine, but I mean, this is what, some folks are charging for it. And, there's a lot of money to be made on these custom signs. Of course, if you wanted to go into finish and do all that, there's even more there. But there's a lot of different ones. I've shown this in my other videos, just some different project ideas, what the MetalFab can do. Obviously, you can do cool metal holders. You could, weld together some cool stuff, the fire pits. Some of these are files, and some of these are actual, pieces. So the one I keep coming back to is, kind of like this design for making benches. But this video, primarily, we focused on, signs and ornaments. But there's a lot more, money to be made, return of investment for such an expensive machine. Got to make sure you're going to make some money out of it. But, stuff like this, I think is just a really, really simple. You can see they have these holes there for the standoffs. It's already there, and see what they're charging. Yeah, I mean, look, so 24 by 24 inches, they're charging 326. This is, again, just one example I found from Etsy. Obviously, lots of options there. I do mention this, in all of my videos. There's just a lot of different files out there and just different inspiration. And one website I use is Creative Fabrica. And instead of spending like $3 or $4 for each of these files, it's $4 for the month. And so you see a couple that you might have seen from the video. $4 for a month for unlimited downloads, and there's quite a few projects in here where you've got all your files, and so I can download all of these unlimited, some ideas for different metal signs, for all the applications. So if you use my link down below, you do get 10 free downloads before paying anything, but lots of cool ideas. You can see some of the ornaments that I used were from here. A lot to get started, to play around with. Here's that big sign that I did, you know, for a front doorway entry. So check that out, Creative Fabrica. Again, the link down below to get started, but it's great savings. And then of course, the other thing about it is we have fonts, right? So if I go, you know, I can use a lot of fonts, and Xtool does have some decent fonts already in the software. We have different ones, but let's say I wanted to get a, you know, stencil font. You know, we can go all kinds of, let's just say stencil font. I may be running too many things on my computer right now, and it's at 2% battery, but you get the idea. Stencil font, and we have lots of options of cool stencil fonts. So I have some more options, because you're going to need that when you cut on signs, so every little piece doesn't you know, go away. So you got a lot more options for some really cool customization if you're doing this for a client. So again, unlimited downloads to get all of these different fonts and add them to your software. So pretty simple, pretty cool. Creative Fabrica, you can check that out. All right, folks, there you have it. Some ideas, some inspiration. Hopefully it added value. If you want to see more videos on the MetalFab, consider subscribing. Got a ton more videos, a lot more projects upcoming. Really will showcase the welding capabilities and bigger projects. And again, that return of investment, it is quite the, you know, investment for this machine. However, there is definitely money to be made. And so, you know, we got ornaments, very popular this time of year. You got your custom signs, and then there's all those other projects we talked about. Well, if you are interested in the machine, at least learning more about it, seeing some of the different variations, consider using this link or the link down below. It is our affiliate link, so if you end up purchasing the machine, my family, we get a small portion back, help support my family. It's why I'm able to make these videos. Excuse me. Consider checking that out, or just learning about it. Lots of good stuff there. Some extra deals and discounts. If you can check the description down below. All right, what else do you want to see the MetalFab do? What are projects you're hoping I can showcase in the future? Let me know in the comments. Well, thank you for watching. Until next time, take care.